The first item we have is public comment. So public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board. And you're given 3 minutes at the mic to address us. We don't respond. It's not a question back and forth kind of thing. It's for you to share information with us. If you need additional time to share additional information, the best way to do that is through email. Our email addresses are on the website, and that is a good way to share information. And Julie McGraw will call people up and then start the timer for 3 minutes. And it must be on a topic on the agenda. So on the form, it did ask you to write that down. So please keep your comments to 3 minutes. In the interest of time, if you are saying the same thing as the previous person, you don't need to restate all the information. You can just say, I agree with the person before me in order to save time tonight. So we look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, the first person is Carol Miller, and she will speak about school start time.
So I just want to formally ask that you listen to all the concerns by the public on this proposed change of school start times. I've been to both listening sessions. I know some of you were at one and some of you were at the other. I hope you watched the videotape of the first one if you weren't there. The vast majority of people are opposed to it. And there's a few people in favor of it, but quite honestly, their reasons are not very compelling as to why they're for it. Whereas there are lots of compelling reasons why people are opposed to it. Are the kids really going to get the extra sleep in the morning? Most people are saying no, they won't. It's going to disrupt families' lives, dinner time loss, sports impacted, opportunities limited, etc. And it's actually just going to create more stress on students, the high achievers who aren't going to get that extra homework time in the afternoon when it's the most productive time to be studying, and they're just going to have to stay up later to do that homework time or be rushed to do it in the morning, and therefore they're still not getting that extra hour of sleep in the morning. So I'm not seeing a lot of good avenues as to why simply changing the start time in the morning is going to get kids that extra hour of sleep, but it's going to disrupt everyone's lives, in the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Wyatt Miller.
I'm just going to add on to what my mom said, but I'm going to speak for all or at least most of the athletes at Mahtomedi. Like, if we change to a later start time, not only will our sports practices be later, like football, for example, like our start time might be at 4 o'clock instead of 3 o'clock, and if we have the same hours, it's going to end at like 6:30, something like that. And there's a few kids out there that do play club sports like baseball, basketball, whatever sport. And there's a lot of kids that do it and they love it. Like, club sports are amazing experience, get to know people from other schools. And that might be, and that's a huge issue because it's a lot of money and a lot of time commitment. So, and athletes just hate to give it up. So I'm opposing this later start time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Suzanne Wazinski. Sorry if I said it wrong. Okay.
I couldn't stop laughing at it.
Okay.
It's true. So I'm Suzanne Wisniewski. I have 3 kids in the district, and a lot of you have seen a lot of the work that I've already written, but I just wanted to reiterate an email that I sent to you all over the last day or so. And I wanted to talk specifically about 6 points that I think will summarize and try to help think about a way forward with this issue, because I think we all agree that student health is really important and we should do something as a district to help them in ways that promotes better education. So my first point is that while it may be true in general that the typical middle school student and high school student does not get enough sleep, the Mahtomedi School District has no systematic evidence that the current sleep problem is severe enough to prioritize this issue above or in conjunction with other pressing issues facing the district. We do not have this evidence. It has not been collected. Anecdotal stories are insufficient. If systematic survey work does strongly suggest that a persistent problem of sleep deprivation exists among Mahtomedi middle and high school students, and that this sleep deprivation has a significant negative impact on academic outcomes and health, then the district does need to consider research on all of the possible causes of the sleep deprivation. Thus far, the focus has only been on one, but there's perhaps many. What are the causes? Is it the start time? Is it smartphone devices? Is it stress? I mean, there's a lot of reasons that could be causing it, and I think it's really narrow-minded just to consider one. The third point is that unless the Mahtomedi School District has solid, systematic evidence regarding points 1 and 2, there's no reason to spend additional taxpayer-funded salaries on the continued study of this issue of delayed school start time. 4, the Mahtomedi School District has yet to provide conclusive evidence from the academic literature that there's a direct causal benefit from a policy of a delayed school start time past 8 o'clock a.m. in terms of increased sleep. There's no evidence of that. I've read as much literature as I could. I'd be happy if somebody could find a piece of evidence or an academic study that says otherwise, and I'd be glad to read it, but I have not seen it yet. Point 5, the Mahtomedi School District's proposal to swap school start times between younger students at Wildwood and O.H. Anderson and older students, the middle and high school, poses unknown risks to half of our district's school population. The Mahtomedi School District has yet to think outside the box. If answers to point 1 and 2 can provide conclusive evidence that sleep is a problem and start time is one of many causes, can't we think of solutions that don't result in benefits to some students at the expense of others? Why can't we think of other ways forward that benefit health for all students, not just for some? That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Roll call of attendance.
Done.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda. Thank you.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Any discussion? I'd like to thank the community members and associations that have donated to our schools in the past month. Under 5A, there's a list of 12 different donations that have been made, many from the Mahtomedi Elementary PTO. Thank you for your support. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, presentations and recognition. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, this is always a highlight of the meeting in which we recognize outstanding staff and students. So at this time, I'd like to have the school board members come to the front of the, I don't know what we call it. It gives me a lot of joy to be able to recognize truly one of our great people here, and I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Mary Schnell. Mary, could you come up here, please? Mary's been recognized by the National Association of School Psychologists, NASP, and his Graduate Education Committee as a model school psychology intern field supervisor. Many people have come to her for advice and help, and she's trained a handful of folks throughout the years. Her selection was based on a nomination by a NASP-approved graduate program, an evaluation completed by 2 interns she has supervised in the past 5 years, and a letter of support from a colleague or supervisor. This is quite an award of a national organization. The work that Mary does to help students is remarkable. I appreciate all that you do, and I want to say on behalf of the board, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
I have the honor tonight to recognize our girls tennis team this fall. The team awards are that they are conference champions, section champions, and third place state at the state finals. Tonight, to represent our tennis team, we have Isabel Berkwin, Come on up, Isabel. And she is all-conference honorable mention, and we also have Annika Hillstrom here to represent the team tonight. So congratulations. So many of our girls couldn't make it tonight. So if you want to meet the board, well, I mentioned the other tennis players. We also have doubles section champions Grace Rearman and Emily Frazier. Doubles third place at state, Grace Rearman and Emily Frazier. Individual section champion, Anna Stutz. Individual section runner-up, Lexi Herod. And Metro East Conference Player of the Year is Grace Rearman. All conference, it's quite the team. Elena Carlson, Emily Frazier, Lexi Herod, Sarah Hoffman, Grace Rearman, Lauren Splett, and Anna Stutz. So let's give a big round of applause to all of our girls in the tennis team.
I'll use the room like Olympics application. Anybody else, Victor?
First, congratulations to Dr. Schnell and the tennis team. That's fantastic. Second, I'm Mike Connolly. I'm the president of MAFE, Mahtomedi Area Educational Foundation, and switching up a little bit here, and I'm asking for money. So before I get to the ask, I want to highlight a few things. Next year, 2018, is the 30th year of MAFE. So 1988 was the year we started it. It was also the year I graduated. So we've grown up together. It's kind of nice. Over those 30 years, we've given out $2 million in donations to the school district and different grants, sponsorships, and scholarships for students and the schools. Last year in particular, we gave out $128,000 in teacher grants, and that's specifically for teacher enrichment and classroom enhancement. Another $49,000 in student scholarships to 36 different students, and $11,000 in sponsorships, which covers basic needs, school supplies, weekend backpack program, and then some community enrichment areas. This year, we're starting our fall fund drive, and of course, that's what I'm here for, asking for some donations and support from the school board, as well as the community. We want to increase, of course, our funding for the three areas I mentioned, the scholarships, the sponsorships, and the grants, to be able to give more and help more directly to students directly in the classroom, and then, of course, for community needs as we increase our focus in that area. So again, please feel free to give. If you have any MAFE questions, let me know. I am free at any time to answer those and espouse the values of MAFE. Thank you for your time. Yes, sir.
Mike, I'm happy to say we have 100% board participation at this time.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that, and it's good to know it goes right back in the schools. Thank you.
Thank you for your work. Next item on the agenda, Mahtomedi Middle School Equity and Innovation. Dr. Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Dr. Mike Newbeck is here, principal of the middle school, to share with you some of the things that have been happening in those two areas that he mentioned. Mahtomedi Middle School is in fact a great place to learn. So, Dr. Newbeck, I can turn over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Larson. I always really enjoy coming at this time and be able to brag about our school and show you kind of where we've been the last year and where we're moving to this year, what we're working on as a school, as a staff, and as a community of learners. So thank you for this opportunity. First of all, I want to just quickly start with some demographics. In sixth grade this year, as of today, we have 266 students, 287 in seventh grade, and 274 in eighth grade. So our total, as of today, is 827 students. By the way, I think that's 3 more than what was there last week. So we are changing as people move in, and I think there's 2 more starting next week from Puerto Rico. Approximately the number of our new students to our district have been about 80 in our school. This year they're new to our district. About 10.4% of our students are on free reduced lunch, and 8.6 are students of special education, and about 15% of our students are students of color. Not including those 2 for next week, we have 7 ELL students, 3 of which are new and speak very little English, from Sudan, Puerto Rico, and so forth, which has been a challenge for us and will continue to be a challenge for us as we include more students. As we quickly go through our last year in review, real quick, our MCA reading, which was our school goal, went up by 4.7%. Our math proficiency for MCAs decreased slightly, and our MCA proficiencies decreased slightly. Our achievement gap between students of color and white students are at 7.06% in reading and 17.4% in math. And so we continue to work on those as our areas in our school. I like to, I've shown this the last couple of years, but I like to show that even though we may be decreasing in math, if you look at the difference between Mahtomedi Middle School and the state average, we are still almost 25% above, percentage points above the state average. So our students are doing awesome in our school. In math for MCAs, this is for reading. We're this year with our 4% increase, we were at over 23% difference between us and the state. And then also in science, even though we dropped, we're still at 33% percentage points higher in science. We are, this past year, we were the 3rd highest middle school in the state for MCA math. That's for middle schools with larger than 100 students in the school. We were the 3rd highest in the state for MCA reading, and we were the 2nd highest in middle schools in the state for MCA science. We are very proud of our students and our staff's accomplishments, but you know, we are really more than test scores. We are very much more than test scores. We are about taking those kids in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade who are growing and learning and need a lot of support. And this year, what our instructional leadership team met at the retreat in August, and we looked at some things that we really wanted to focus on, and the 2 items were being inclusive, the inclusiveness of our school, and again, building relationships. We think that if we can make students feel like they belong and build those strong relationships, that those test scores will remain strong, and we'll just have kids that will want to be at school and will want to learn and be able to work with our staff. And so we are really focused on those 2 areas this year. During our staff workshop, we really focused on building an inclusive community. We defined equity and cultural awareness and what that means as we increase in diversity and increase in social economic status and so forth. We really need to take a look at our own awareness, our own culture, our own bias, our own privilege and so forth. That's what we're doing throughout this year. We also examine topics like status and how does that play out in the classroom, not just in our community, but how does that play out in a group of 4 students. Who has status, who doesn't have status, how is that played out, how does one learn, and when one doesn't learn because they kind of get pushed out, you know, sometimes we see that student as not involved, not engaged, and all we see is the big, we talked about as staff, when we're doing group work, we see this group working, and the one kid's kind of off doing nothing and doesn't seem like they're doing nothing, when really, maybe because of status in the group, they couldn't do something, or they were not able to do something. So it really opened our staff's eyes about, you know, really taking a look at their practice and what really is happening and trying to find out what really happens during that time. Again, we looked at bias and how it affects our teaching and our classrooms. During that staff workshop week, we watched several videos, and we started with Simon Sinek's Start With Why. That was our first day. And we wanted our staff to go back, and I asked them, why did you start as a teacher? Some of them started, Mr. Began 45 years ago. You know, why did he start as an educator? And why do you do it now? And is there a difference? For some people, there was a difference of why they're teaching now compared to what they were in the past. It also made people think about, the reason I asked them is because when we make change and we want to make change and we want to put that forward for something better, and yet they may be hesitant to that change, why? What's their why? Is it in conflict with their why? isn't in conflict with their own personal why, and so forth. And so it really started to open some people's eyes, had that conversation between staff about how do I embrace change as we go. And then we had what makes a good teacher great. Something I'd never done before. I watched this video, and so during the before school started, I asked for students, I sent it out to students and said, tell me what makes a good teacher great. What grade level are you? What do you think makes a good teacher great? What makes a school what do you want your teachers to know about you? What would make your classroom better? And then also, what do you want to let the principals know about what makes a school great? What would make things better for you? We got some great responses. I broke it up by grade levels. I handed it to the teachers. A lot of it was, I want a teacher that's, organized, firm, fair, but one who likes me. I want someone who wants to get to know me. I want someone who's really going to care about me. And so it was obvious to our teachers that that's really what those kids are looking for. There weren't many that say, I want to know what fractions are. I want to know how to write better. They really just want teachers to see who they are and what they bring. And so it was a great week, because as we look at Every Child Needs a Champion, all the different types of videos up there, and we, again, did a lot of talking together, pair talking, group talking, and I also made them talk with people they probably haven't talked with ever before. I made them go to a different grade level, a different discipline, so they couldn't do someone sitting at their usual table. And so our staff, I think, became much closer during the staff workshop week this year. But our work continues. We're working very closely with Sarah Dusick, the equity coordinator in our district, and we already have all of our staff development days and our staff meeting days planned out. And Kevin came to talk to our staff about MAIF, and I had to kick him off after 5 minutes because we had some equity things that we wanted to work on. So I had to ask him to hurry up. We got to go. We got things to do. So we have our year planned. Our equity team, we put together an equity team with Sarah Dusick to talk about what's happening in our school. That team has also gone over to work and will be working for a total of 3 trainings with 622, North St. Paul, Maplewood, and Oakdale. Our middle school staff got a chance to meet with their middle school staff. They are 5 to 6 years into working with this book, Culturally and Linguistic Responsive Teaching and Learning, from Dr. Shiraki Howley. And so we were able to ask them if we start looking into this type of teaching, or how, because we heard from their teachers who've been teaching for 20 years that this training has really changed the way they've taught and the way they think about teaching and the way they present their class. So we started to ask, well, if you're in our shoes, just starting, how would you do that? So we're meeting with them. We have their curriculum coach and their equity person coming over to speak with us on the 19th of January. Their curriculum or their equity person, Jeff Cavitt's, going to bring over some of their middle school teachers to actually work with our middle school teachers and give examples of what that will be. We're hoping that that's going to kick off some excitement with our staff. And then over the summer, Shiraki Howley does 2 trainings over the summer that we're hoping to send a group of staff there to get trained from him to come back and train and help our staff as we move forward. And then also in late November, we are having 2 staff members come from St. Paul School District, and I think they are school psychologists, and they're coming to talk about their ACE program, or the trauma training. You know, kids have trauma at home. They deal with a lot of things at home that we don't see. And how does that play out into our classrooms, and how do our teachers deal with that? We are seeing more and more of that. Last week I talked to a student in my office. He couldn't get himself to go to class because his father had just left to move to Arizona and left the rest of them behind, and he just couldn't get, he's supposed to now study, and how was that trauma, what are the things happening in the classroom or at home, and how does that play out with our teachers? So that's going to be our training on November 22nd. This is our new banner. As you walk into the middle school, if you haven't been in there, and talking about equity, we want everyone to feel welcome. And by the way, you saw we talked about our flags last year. We added 7 new flags this year for students whose parents or themselves came from another country and so forth. So we're up to 36 different flags in our school right now. So It's amazing. Last spring, we started a SAFE group, Students Advocating for Equity. It's actually started at the high school, but we had some of their students come down and start a group with our students, and it continues this year. Brooke Carlson is the advisor, and you can see this sign here, "We All Belong." That was a sign that was put up about the second week of school this year. The SAFE group wanted to do something to make students feel welcome as they come into our school. So what else is happening? Well, Ms. Sorensen, our associate principal, she's starting to pull kids during lunch, and she'll say, "Hey, come have lunch with me." And she'll take a table of girls or a table of boys, and they'll go in the conference room, and they're like, why do you want to have lunch with me? Am I in trouble? Is that what our table do? No, I just want to find out. She sits down, and she says, "How's the year going? How's things? What would you change? How are our friends? How's the hallways? How's your classrooms? What's your plans for the future? How can we help?" And it's just been a great conversation with our kids, so she's doing that. Email, after 6 weeks, I sent an email home to every new student in our school, so about 80 of them, to our parents, asking how things are going, how we can help. And, most, I would say probably 90% of the parents, it's been a great transition. The 10% who said, "Oh, there's still some struggles," it was CC'd to the counselor. The counselor the next day was right there, calling the parent or talking to the student, say, "How can we help?" So after those 6 weeks, those students felt like they belonged. We have right there, that picture, it's hard to see, but that is our 6th grade new student lunch. So after the first 2 weeks of school, we had all the new students come in, so they get to see who the other new students are. They brought up their school lunch. We had a little celebration, had a little cake for them, and so forth, but each grade level, so that they could start making connections. Mr. Bagan said that he has done the 1-minute meetings with counselors and students. He just finished his, or close to finishing. He said what's surprising to him, even with all the new students, he would ask students, "So do you have a friend in school, someone you can count on?" And about 85% of the kids, the 90% said, "Yep, I met somebody new." And with those new students, about 90% of them said, "Yep, I've really met somebody new." And he said, but I asked one more question, "Can you name them?" Because they'll say, "Yes, I know somebody." Can you name? And they were able to name some kids that they've gotten to connect with. In October, we did Bully Prevention Week. We used some of the PACER information. We did daily announcements and videos in advisory. We had our advisory teachers then talk to our students, and they had great discussions about being a bystander, what they could do different. I think I sent out on the last school board report, there was a link that Ms. Sorensen did. She actually used the information from our SAFE group to be able to make that video and the script. They helped her write the script for that. And then we did all the pictures and stuff, so that was great. Unity Day was that Wednesday, and we had students either wear orange or Zephyr colors. This is a student council member during Unity Day going around, and the student council put out those little notes on all the lockers. The one says, "Keep on, keep it on," and the other one says, "Keep smiling." And they made sure that they did that during advisory, so when everybody came out of advisory, there was a note on everyone's locker to let them know that someone is thinking about them and someone wants them to keep going, even if things get tough. In band this year, we've seen a larger request for scholarships. We talk about that equity and that need that we're starting to see. So many of our 8th grade students, Ms. Nijelka, have gotten our 8th grade students in band to become mentors for the younger ages, and even sometimes give some lessons to them, because a lot of them can't afford the extra lessons and so forth. We've done more get-to-know-you activities in the classroom. Some of the teachers have told me they've been placing personal questions at the end of maybe a test or quiz, just to get to know who kids are, and maybe some fun question. And then you can see that what we modeled with our teachers in the beginning of the year, our teachers are doing. This is Ms. Goodrich's English class, and that's a dyad. So she would ask them a question, and then they would have to sit and face each other. And one person would have to talk for 1 minute without the other person saying anything to them, and just talk while the other person has to listen actively. And then they would take turns going back and forth. So it was hard for kids to, one, talk for a minute, the other kid to listen without talking for a minute. That was even harder, I think, for some kids. We did also talk about restorative practices. A lot of it we already do, I will have to say, but we talked about again with our staff, and we're really trying to have teachers are really trying to get to the issue of the problem, talking with kids more. Their students are asked to fix the problem. We are doing some restorative circles. The administration, along with behavioral specialist Chelsea Paquette, meet regularly. Actually, there's a group that's having some difficulty together, so they meet almost on a weekly basis as a check-in, how things are going, and it's getting better with that group. We will also continue throughout this year to develop more tools for dealing with various problems for using restorative methods. So really, I found this cartoon. I thought this really hit home about what we're trying to do, and I reminded our staff, helping one person might not change the whole world, but it could change the world for that one person. So, and they took that to heart. So what else is happening? Well, our language arts department's working with 622. Again, like I said, they've also been 5 or 6 years into the Lucy Calkins Writers Workshop. So our teachers this summer went over to work with them. They've also been over there one other time this year, and we've had their coaches come over twice to work with our language arts teachers to look at a new Writers Workshop model that 6th grade teachers started last year, but now 7th and 8th grade teachers are implementing. Our 6th grade teachers are beginning the Readers Workshop model this year as well. Math teachers have been working with Terry Weiberg, that's grades 6 through 12, and also social studies. 3 of our social studies teachers are piloting a program called Respectful Conversations. It's probably not in yours because I just learned about it this morning. And they came up and told me, hey, we're doing this. It's through a program that's with the University of Minnesota. It's about having developed skills in discussion and debate without getting, and doing it the right way. There's been a lot of bad role models out there about discussing, debating, and having some problems in the media. And so they're learning how to do that in their social studies classes. Some other areas, accelerated science, we started this year in 6th grade. And so students need to be at the 95th percentile in math, reading, and science because they are doing 3 years of middle school science in 2 years. So they need to be able to be very good in math, they need to be very good readers, and they need to have a high interest in science. In grades 8, right now the plan is they'll be doing possibly the present science curriculum that's in 9th grade. The premise is that we are meeting the needs of our most advanced science learners. Also, it might help them as they move into the high school and looking at AP type courses. We're also working to revamp some of our engineering classes to include more coding and programs that students will see throughout their science classes. A parent has come forward and has gone through the process. It's a free program for coding for girls. We have signups going. I'm not sure how many have signed up yet, but that should start in December and will go through up to spring break. And that's once a week for 2 hours. We've been some of our staff have taken tours of middle schools to look at their media centers and how to create more innovative spaces throughout our school. And then also we received a MAPE grant last year for lending libraries in our social studies classes. So we have historical fiction and so forth in each of our social studies classes. So students who want to read that for a book is available if they're into World War II things or anything that's more available in their social studies classes. We also had a fundraiser, our magazine fundraiser, which is a great community builder. It did bring in around $20,000 again this year for our parent association. We work closely with them. Our jazz bands and show choirs are still going strong. Jazz band will, I think in a few weeks, will be going back out to the Mall of America. Show choirs will be going over to St. Andrews and in our elementary schools. Service learning projects, we've already done, 2 days ago, our 6th graders went over to the St. Andrews to do door hangers. We will be doing Cash for Kids, and we did a fundraiser this year through our student council and our fire ed teacher, Ms. Josen, for hurricane victims. We had our fall play. We will be having our spring musical and our 8th graders went to William O'Brien State Park in Taylor's Falls. 6th grade will be going to Fort Snelling. We did yesterday have some students, our students in math strategies who need the extra math actually went out to the zoo and they did some math problems, made it real life math problems and so forth. We still have a math counts club, ski club, 200 students in ski club probably in January. Our middle school sports, Monday advisories, we started this last year, it was great. There's an all-school reading, including the principal, including the secretaries. Everyone drops everything and reads for 20 minutes after announcements on Mondays. And then student recognitions, we still do that every month. Student council, yesterday went to We Day down at the Excel Energy Center. That's a great, they're great leaders, and it's a great way for them to connect with other schools and listen nationwide about what they do on We Day or what they're doing for We Day nationwide. This is no secret about the middle school. Middle school can be a very challenging 3 years. I've talked about that before. Students for academically, emotionally, socially, physically. We hold them to a high rigor as a student, and we have high standards as a citizen. We really want them to be good students, and most of all, though, great citizens. But working in middle school is not for everybody. We also know that they need our support along the way. This is what makes working in middle school much like a roller coaster some days, but roller coasters can be fun. And so that's what makes middle school so much fun to be at. This quote, as we talk with our staff, kind of sums it up. As we work with our kids, is every child you pass in the hall has a story that needs to be heard. Maybe you are the one meant to hear it. And so you never know what that student brings that day, like that student who ended up in my office and something happened with his father, how to help him get to class and do what he needs to for him. And so you never know who comes into your office or into your classroom. So thank you. And any questions about what's happening at the middle school?
Questions? Mike?
I was wondering about the MAFE grant to place in the lending libraries.
Mhm.
And you said historical fiction. So what kind of books are in there? I mean, what's an example of one? I mean, is it like Number of the Stars or something? Or?
To tell you the truth, I didn't order the books. But there might be some biographies on some war heroes in there. There might be the historical fiction. And I'm just blanking on some of the titles, but it might be of someone who might be in the war, might be going through World War II. It could be nonfiction. It could even be a fictional character placed in World War II and going through something like that. And maybe it might be an adolescent student or adolescent kid who's going through World War II and so forth. I just can't think of any of the titles off my head. All I did was order the shelves, make sure they were built, and got them in. And Sue Sorensen, she's the one who put in for the MAFE grant. She's a former social studies teacher, so she worked with our social studies teachers and said, they went to the high interest part of like Scholastic and so forth and said, what are the high interest reads in that area? So, and the year before we used about $5,000 to put in individual libraries in our English classrooms as well. So the reads, the Harry Potters, those sort of things. So kids don't necessarily have to go to the library to check them out. They can just check them out right with their English teacher. When they're having those Monday advisory all school reads, they don't have to go somewhere else. It's right there. They can go find a book. And if the teacher knows that they have that interest, it's usually there. So, Yes.
You mentioned the students who, I don't remember what you referred to them, but they got to go to the zoo.
Yes.
Is that one of the strategies towards helping our students who are maybe falling in the bottom of that achievement gap?
The students who are in our math strategies are the ones who are probably at the 30th percentile or lower and find math really hard and really boring at times and very difficult. So this was the first time that we did this, and Katie Ahrens, our teacher, asked if she could take them because she read about this math day where they would go out there and there's a packet for them and they could just do different math problems that are maybe even simple division, simple math, maybe some fraction problems that they could work on, but actually see it happening at the zoo. Plus it was her way of developing relationships with them. And so one of the last pictures on there was of those students. Probably about 15 students that went. And so they went with her, and there's a para a lot of times that's in that room to help them, and they're trying to build their skills because they're maybe 1 or 2 grade levels below, and so they're trying to build those. So it was a really interactive life learning life ways instead of just reading out of a book and trying to do things. So they
So are
like that.
trying is this one of some other ideas they're trying, or the hope is maybe if this seems successful, they'll do it in years?
There'll be other, yep, and I think it was successful, so they'll be looking at doing it in other years. But it's really just trying to find a way to hook those kids into math. And then she'll find other ways, either in the classroom or online. They do a lot of work online with gaming programs and so forth like that to help them build those math skills. They have that class besides their regular math class also. So they have 2 hours of math every other day. So it's a way to show them this isn't just more work. And they try to make it fun for them. So
But they're getting the attention.
they are getting the attention, yes.
So I just have a comment and a question. You spoke of relationships, but you also really showed that you as a principal are modeling that with your staff, and the fact that you had the staff, talk with other people at that staff meeting. So you're really showing them that you too are thinking about relationships, and I think that's very powerful. So I thank you for that work. For the Monday all-school read, what are you reading?
What am I reading?
Yeah.
Well, I'm reading a lot of different things. It's whatever, because, let's see, 2 weeks ago during the Innovation Task Force, I was given the book Empower, so I read that.
Okay.
I'm reading the linguistic and culturally. I'm trying to keep up with the teachers, or what I would want them to do, so I'm trying to do that. So, yeah, to tell you the truth, I read whatever's sitting on my desk. It might be an article or something I'm behind on. That's what I read, so.
Oh, good. I was just looking for good suggestions. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other comments? All right. Nicely done. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a great night.
Emma, student report.
Okay, there's a lot of congratulations to be given this week. I know it was already mentioned that the girls tennis team placed third in state, and that we're really proud of them. The girls soccer just won state last Thursday. They beat Orono, and it was at the U.S. Bank Stadium, and I was there, and it was such a cool experience to be in the Viking Stadium, and it was empty, except the student section. So it was really cool to cheer on the girls, and they got the win. Also, SLC just raised 1,742 pounds of food for the St. Jude's food shelf in our Trick or Can fundraiser. We collected food over the Halloween weekend, and then we brought it to the food shelf. And it goes out to families within the Mahtomedi community. So that was something worthwhile that we did. NHS had their blood drive on Tuesday through the Red Cross, and I know a lot of people went and donated blood, and that was awesome. The boys football team has their first game of state this Saturday. It's at Lakeville North at 6 p.m. So hopefully it'll be. Last week's game, it was snowing, and they had to plow the field. So hopefully it will be a little warmer. Also, conferences were tonight, and tomorrow morning is the last day for them. The Mahtomedi Theater, the fall play, You Can't Take It With You, is coming up. It's going to be, the opening night is Thursday, November 16th, and then it runs through Sunday. Also, the first girls hockey game is tonight, and I know a lot of the winter sports are starting up. We're having captain's practice for most sports, and then practices are starting soon. So really it's been pretty busy, and now that the first quarter is over, we're starting to focus more on finals are coming up. So it's going to be a stressful time of year, but it's been fun. Thank you.
Okay, approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes, October 12th, the regular meeting, October 26th, the study session. A motion? So moved. Thank you. Second from Kevin, thank you. Any discussion, comments? I wanted to clarify one thing in the minutes. It doesn't need to be changed, Laura. I just had a couple calls, and so I just want to clarify to people in the minutes on page 38, item C. Find it here. There was a presentation at this meeting about early childhood finance and facility structures, and there was a presentation on the potential use of space in the district, and I know the facilities committee had some feedback, and the board was not voting or deciding, and this is not the only option on the table, but was brought forward as a possibility. And so I did have some community calls, and I just wanted to clarify that the minutes are correct. That is what happened, but it was not an item of vote or decision that was made. Is that a fair statement? I've looked at my fellow board members. Okay. All right. Any other comments? All those in favor of the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Discussion information items, calendar of events. Dr. Larson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. There's a whole host of activities coming up. December is quite a great month for music, band concerts, choir concerts. Emma mentioned the play coming up, but there are also other things that are happening, from the EEA Advisory Council meeting, our Educational Equity Alliance meeting. That's coming up on Tuesday the 14th. And then on Thursday the 16th, we have our legislators' reception. That's usually been very well attended. All of our local representatives and senators are there, and also some other ones have also attended as well. Dr. Newbeck made mention of the Empower book that he's reading. The Empower book discussion is happening on Monday, November 20th, and the Innovation Task Force is meeting after that. In addition, we have a meeting with the city's leaders that's coming up on December 1st. And then we've also have, I missed the Bel Air, South Campus and Bel Air Education Center tour with District 916 on the 29th. And then, as I mentioned, please look at the events that are coming music-wise. There's going to be some really good stuff.
Other things board members want to call out? I'd like to remind board members we have 2 conferences coming out. Laura sent out emails to all of us asking for registrations for AMSD conference coming up and the School Board Association conference in January. In addition, we have the TIES conference, which hasn't come out yet, but will be coming soon. Historically, we have sent a board member to the TIES conference, and so if you haven't had an opportunity to go recently, it's a very good conference to attend, so be thinking about that.
And communicate that through Patrick if you're interested
Yep.
in attending.
Yep. Thank you. Anything else? All right. First reading of new and revised policies. These policies have been to the policy committee for discussion already, and now they come to the full board. Dr. Larson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And members of the board, there are 6 policies here, and some of them they've all been to the policy committee, reviewed by administration, and also Minnesota School Board Association has weighed in on them. This is the board reading them for the first time, although the policy committee has looked at them and made some suggestions. There are a few changes that I want to very briefly refer to. Policy 509 is the enrollment of non-resident students. We eliminated the language of that is also in statute. So it was a duplication. It didn't need to be in policy. That's the change for that one. In policy 614, school district testing plan and procedure, the change made in that was that we've included the test security procedures as part of your packet. We have, those were changed this year. At the policy committee meeting, we had the procedures from 2016-17, and now we have the procedures from 2017-18. So that's changed or in there. The board does not approve procedures, but they're part of the information nonetheless. Then, when you get to a little bit further on here, we have, as I mentioned, the test security procedures, and then in policy
620.
Number 620, credit for learning, we're required to have information about weighted grades at the high school. We do have weighted grades, so that's added there. A weighted grade is a letter or numerical grade that's assigned a numerical advantage when calculating grade point average. And then it also includes where they are. And the weighted grades, we do offer weighted grades at the high school, but we do not report individual rank in class. And then the grade point averages, A is a 4, B is a 3, and so forth. Advanced placement classes that are taught at Mahtomedi High School by Mahtomedi teachers will receive an extra 10% in weight for grade point average calculations. College in the schools, CIS classes, also taught at the high school by the high school teachers, receive an extra 10%. So that's the change in that.
You want to take a question? To wait till the end?
Oh,
While we're going through.
Might be easier as we're going through. Were there questions on the first 2? Okay. I think Julie's question.
I just had a question on the weighted grades. I'm curious why PSEO grades aren't weighted if they're from an accredited institution.
We don't have control of curriculum and the post-secondary enrollment options. We don't have control of the instructor. Here, the classes are taught at the high school by the high school teachers. So that's our quality control.
Is there an option to add PSEO to the weighted grades?
It's a board policy, so the board could request that change.
Yeah.
I think it could be worth investigating. I mean, we're always comparing ourselves to other, I mean, I don't know, but it just seems like they're taking a college class, is that something?
And it might be what best meets that student's needs.
Yes. That it seems like it could be more rigor and they're not being rewarded. I don't know what the answer is, but
So are you
that struck
requesting,
out.
are you
Yeah.
requesting additional information?
What are the options? Are we, because we don't
This is-
amend it right now,
This is
so.
the first reading.
Right, right, so what are the
The
next
options are
steps?
wide open. If you'd like me to explore what we're doing, the rationale behind this, and maybe also look at other school districts to see what they're doing, then I can do that and get it back for the second reading. We would not make a decision on any policy until January.
Kevin, do you have a comment?
one of the MSBA model policies? Was it based on?
No, it is part of the model policy, but they did not have a specific recommendation about how to weight grades.
So on that same policy, anything else about that
So,
piece?
yes, we would like
So
that.
I would like additional information and a comparison of what other districts do.
For the PSU. I think we have to be aware that this is new statute and other districts might not have this in their policies yet, so it might be more conversation you have with superintendents through your ties collaborative you're in, 916 SUPs and things like that. So we might not be able to find necessarily policy because other boards are where we are possibly with the policy. And so it might have to be more informal information gathering, I think.
Agreed, but school districts have had practices of how they've weighted grades without
Mhm.
board policies.
Right.
And so
Okay.
I would suspect that it exists
Okay.
without board approval though in some other
Right.
area schools. So I think that would be fairly accessible.
Okay, good.
So I'll look for comparisons, see what they're doing, the rationale on post-secondary enrollment options as well.
Okay. The other piece of information that was requested at the policy meeting on the 12th was on page 70 or page 4 of the policy, under 5B3. There's the chart of how the college credits come in for the PSEO courses. And I had asked at that point to look at Century and U of M and places where we get most of our credits from, because this is based upon a 4-credit model. And if other schools are on a 3-credit model, it could cause problems with their transcripts and things. So I'm not sure where you are with that data gathering, so that's just a reminder that we'll want to look at that data too.
We looked at it and we added the 5 college credit
Right.
class as something that had been out there.
So, but when you think about where our students are taking their PSEO classes, are they taking them at the U and Century, and what are, those are two I know most about, from our students talking about their PSEO experiences. So at Century and at the U of M, is their standard class a 3-credit class or a 4-credit class? Because if their standard is a 3-credit class, and then it comes in to Mahtomedi as .75, then they're missing a quarter of a class, and how do they get that? So if our most commonly used systems are using a 3-point system, I would like to reconsider this chart. If they're a 4-credit system, I don't think we need to reconsider the chart, possibly. But if we could continue to follow up on that from the policy meeting, would be great.
I did have a conversation with high school guidance, and they walked through it. To alleviate concerns about students not getting enough credits to graduate, they would go through all of this with students so that they're aware of where they are in terms of what's going to happen. But I'll check to see standard college credit, like a 3-credit class at Century and
U
U
of M.
of M.
Are there other, and other places our students might be going? I just know those are the two I hear students talking about the most.
A lot of kids go to Bethel.
To
Few.
Bethel?
A lot
Okay.
of kids go to Bethel.
Bethel?
too, yeah.
I'm sorry, Em? And Northwestern?
Yep.
So maybe look at all of those. Because even if students are counseled that that's the impact of their choice, is that fair? I think. So if we could just look at that data to know if we're doing the right thing here, because it might not even be a chart, it might be based on language that says the institutional standard, kind of piece. So I think we need to explore that a little bit more.
Okay.
Thank you. Any others on that? Okay. So 721?
The,
Page 74.
as I mentioned, the credit for learning,
Too many pages. Lots of policy.
policy 903, I don't have the other one just yet, I'll get that as we get comments on it. Policy 903, the change in that is about visitors to school district property and facilities. We have to have something in there about post-secondary enrollment option students, and so the change there is an addition. This is recommended by the Minnesota School Boards Association. A student enrolled in the post-secondary enrollment options course may remain at the school site during the regular school hours in accordance with established procedures, and a student in a post-secondary enrollment options course may be provided with reasonable access to a computer and that type of thing. So that has been the addition in that particular policy. We did not examine homeschool students, and for reasons that it would end up creating more of an issue than it currently exists. We did
Right.
explore that.
But it wasn't homeschooling, there's that curriculum statute about opting out of a curriculum. So if a parent objects to a curriculum material or a curriculum topic, they can, by state statute, opt their student out. And so that student too would hopefully have the same access, but they're not listed here. Are we?
No, there's no need to list them. They're treated as an individual. We have not run into any problems with that, nor do we expect to. Would you like to have something like that in there?
Well, I think it's the same basic thing here. I don't think the parents who pushed for the statute legislatively thought they'd run into any problems with their student having space to study in their high school, and they did. And so, to me, it's the same thing. So students who are objecting to the curriculum, or families that are objecting to the curriculum, I think it's good to be clear with them that their student will still be in the building and still have access to things. I'm not sure how many students we have. I know of a handful. And that's it. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that or understand what we're talking about. Do you need more explanation?
So, there was an issue with schools in, I think it was in a rural area, that they didn't want to allow students to stay in the classroom because the student was enrolled in PSEO, which means they leave the school, so the money follows the student, so the school wasn't receiving full funding for that student.
So the lawmakers this past session said, nope, that student gets to stay in the school all day long if that's where they need to be, and they can still take their PSEO. So this was changed into law. So Lucy's point is, and this is where I don't know, but the students who are opting out of a class here, do we lose funding for that 1 hour that they're not in this class?
Yes.
So that is probably the line of thinking that led to this. So is that something we would like to address now, or, so that's how we got to where we are.
So that's the question, is do we want to add language for the students who are using the curriculum statute, like the PSEO statute, or combine that and have those students included in this language? Or are we comfortable not writing policy for them and saying they'll just be okay? Is what you're recommending, Mark, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
not adding more to it.
Others?
I'm feeling like that is not the tone in our district, that would happen. But right now it's not.
Right.
So.
Tone meaning?
I just mean we wouldn't deny someone the
Okay.
right to.
Okay, I want to make sure it was that
Yes.
kind of tone.
Yes, yes.
Which tone?
Yes.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Then, all right.
I'll check with MSBA and see if there's some language that they have or
Well,
would recommend,
I
and
think-
and I'll explore it on that one.
Right. Unless other board members feel strongly, I think the board is saying we don't need to add that we're comfortable with the handling of it with the administration, that these students are allowed to stay in the building and do their work and.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
And that's our current practice.
Mhm.
That's the practice.
Right.
So as long as we're assured of that. I
Yep.
feel-
I feel
Okay.
good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Policy 721, uniform guidance, policy regarding federal revenue sources. This is from Minnesota School Boards Association, and it was reviewed by Bill Menardi, business manager, and it's fine as it is. Then the recycling, or the waste, questions on everything?
So what's the revision? Or it's just a brand new policy?
Brand new policy.
Okay,
We've
thank
not had it before.
Okay.
Yeah, we skipped ahead, now we're going back. Okay, last one, waste reduction and recycling?
Yep, that had been reviewed by Julie Osterbauer, head of buildings and grounds. She took one thing out about that we do not have I can't remember, it was like soy products or something, there was some small thing in there that was changed, and she felt that we're in compliance and it's budget rules. And it's also a new policy, waste reduction and recycling needle policy.
Any other questions for Dr. Larson on policies for additional information? All right, great. 9C, student wellness, sleep, and school start times. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, I have a presentation that I'd like to share, and then get more direction from the board as different things that we want to proceed with. So what we have here is very similar. It's the exact same PowerPoint that was made this afternoon, earlier this evening to the listening session about student wellness, sleep, and school start times. One of the things that's really important is that where you get your information and so on, the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine position paper states that delaying middle school and high school start times promotes student health and performance. The school board has had student wellness as a goal for some time and has explored a whole host of things, from the wellness policy about snacks and stuff like that we looked at last year, to chemical health and Minnesota student survey data, and now school start time because of sleep. One of the things that the school districts cannot do is they cannot parent children and put them to bed. And so families are oftentimes concerned about students going to sleep at a certain time. We can't dictate or mandate that. We can't control overscheduled students. We can't control we can't put them to bed earlier. We can't take away their cell phones at night and those type of things. But the school district can do some things that will benefit student sleep and student wellness through sleep, and one of them is to change school start times at the secondary level. This has been something that's been going on for quite some time. We've talked about it since August of 2016, and here we are now in November of 2017, so over a year. We've also talked with other school districts and have gone to several sleep presentations throughout the metro area. And these are some of the things that we've done in terms of communication and in terms of things that the school board has also looked at. Right now, where we are is that we've had the executive summary. All this information is on the website. We've done listening sessions at each of the school sites, from early childhood and the middle school and high school and Wildwood and OH. PTO presentation, and then we had our second listening session tonight. And the school board is to act in December of 2017. A lot of research finding, and the research strongly supports a later school start time for adolescents. When you look at some of the documentation, one of the articles is from the University of Kentucky from 2015, excuse me. They cite 26 studies about the need for adolescents to get more sleep. They researched both later and earlier start times, and the evidence was conclusive that later starts benefit adolescents. The same study, though, also concludes with this about elementary students. Our findings indicate that early school start times may be just as detrimental for young children as they are for adolescents, so you can go too early. The National Sleep Foundation has examined elementary students changing their school start times from 7:10 to 7:45 a.m., and they've stated, in summary, a change to earlier school start time did not decrease the total amount of sleep rate reported by elementary school students. And this is a self-reported survey. There's a student study. There is not a lot of research out there on elementary school start times and elementary sleep. There's quite a bit on adolescence because adolescents, as people know, the brain development, the prefrontal cortex, all that type of thing is quite a lot is happening at that time, and so it's a much more robust field for research. There are a lot of things that we've considered, one of which is student wellness. And the key thing is that the school board has a responsibility to examine things from educational trends, how we use technology, how we are going to use computers, how we're going to examine curriculum, and how we're going to deal with student wellness. And so this is a topic that we should be looking at, and I'm glad that we are. Insufficient sleep is associated with reduced academic performance, depressed moods, increased emotional outbursts, and it's more likely to, a student who's sleep deprived is also more likely to use tobacco, alcohol, and drugs. And this comes from Kayla Wallstrom, and also the Minnesota Sleep Society has also cited that. We've looked at other school districts around us in terms of what they're doing and why. Wayzata, Buffalo, Mounds View, and St. Paul are the four most recent ones that have switched school start times.
Largely, Mounds View did not change their middle school, but they did change their secondary schools and some elementaries. Wayzata still has 3 tiers. Buffalo does not. St. Paul has been bouncing all over the place. So, but we also compared not just what other school districts are doing, but also our athletic conference. We always use those schools as a comparison, and the neighboring school districts. There's 12 in all. And what we found is that at the elementary, 5 of the districts have elementary schools that start earlier than Mahtomedi, and Mahtomedi has the shortest school day of 6 hours and 20 minutes. None of the other elementaries have as short a day. The middle schools, 8 of them start earlier, 3 start later, and 1 starts at 8 o'clock just as we do. 8 of the school districts have a longer school day, 4 have the same, and none have a shorter school day than our 6-hour and 30-minute school day. At the high school, we find that 6 start earlier, 4 start later, and 2 start at 8 o'clock. 7 of them have a longer school day, 4 have the same school day, and none have a shorter day. The reason why the numbers don't quite add up is because Hilmer and St. Thomas are school districts that only have high schools. They don't have the elementary program as part of that, and they weren't part of our looking at studies. We also examined the legal requirements. Now, the state of Minnesota mandates a total number of hours of instructional time for kindergarten, grades 1 through 5, and grades 6, and then 7 and 12. In kindergarten, we're over by 155 hours over the minimum, and grades 1 through 5 were 88 hours over. Grade 6 is 97 hours over the minimum. But grades 7 and 12 are only 12 hours over the minimum, and that's pretty close. We have had to have people come back from staff development days in the event of a lot of snow days or cold days, that type of thing. We've also looked at adding 10 minutes to the secondary school day. That would create a buffer of about 40 hours, and it could also possibly provide some staff development opportunities. So that's one of the things that we've spent time looking at as well. Much of the time, though, has been spent on transportation. And then we've gathered information from the Minnesota Central and the CISO, Center for Efficient School Operations. We have 18 bus routes, and the cost is approximately $55,000 annually per bus. For secondary ridership, there is no morning route that is more than 1 hour long, and there's only one that's between 50 and 60 minutes. And there's also same with the afternoon routes. None is more than 1 hour long. But we attribute this to the fact that students are driving at the secondary level. And if you're going to ride on the bus, then it's more likely that you'll be trying to drive or get a ride with someone else. Elementary ridership, though, is different. We have 2 morning buses and 4 afternoon buses that are more than 60 minutes in length, bus ride for some students. And I just want to be clear that it's some students. It's not that not everyone gets, all 68 people get on the bus at one time and they ride for an hour. It's the first people that get picked up and so forth. But it is a long ride, and it makes for a long day for students, both in the morning and then at the end of the day. We have 9 morning and 7 afternoon bus runs that are 50 to 60 minutes in length. So we've looked at that. Also with transportation, there's a lot to do about the cost scenarios. If we had 1 bus tier instead of 2, the estimation is of an additional $80,000, and this comes from CISO and Central Minnesota. And part of the rationale on that is that you do not have any economies of scale savings by you having the same bus drivers do 2 bus routes. You have to hire a whole new crew, you have to maintain that many more buses, and you have to store them and all that type of thing. 2 district service providers would be an additional cost of about $700,000, and that we have not gone out for bids on that, and our information comes to us from CISO and Minnesota Central. We've also looked at flipping the secondary and the elementary and adding time to the secondary school day. If we were to add time to secondary school day of 10 minutes, as I said earlier on, that would add about approximately $145,000, and this would be due largely to extended driver time. So there would be a cost on that if we added time. If we compress the time between the Tier 1 and Tier 2, as I mentioned, we have 2 morning buses and 4 afternoon buses that are more than 60 minutes in length. If we wanted to compress the time so that we wouldn't have that hour-long or gap in between, we could do that. We would have to add 5 more buses, and that would bring the time down between the first tier starting school and the second tier starting schools, but it would be about $330,000 for 5 additional buses. We also looked at getting vans for elementary students, and so a van then would go and pick out some of those farther outlying school districts, some of those farther outlying schools, students on the outer parts of the district. The cost is $80 per day, and we estimated that we would need at least 5 vans to pick up and drop off the students who have the longest bus ride.
The cost would be about $400 per day then, 80 times 5 is 400, and we'd have to pay an additional expense of about $68,000. But these are just estimates. They have not exactly run all of the numbers yet on that. But transportation certainly is a key, and it is a big issue that we need to figure out if it's any change that we want to do. And then finally, the most important piece about it is the impacts that would have. We've looked a lot at the impacts on students and about their after-school activities. That's something that we hear about quite often, the after-school activities that students are involved in. And we have a lot of different things that are going on. And one of the concerns that's been mentioned often was about what happens if we have students who are involved in activities and they get pulled out of school early. In the fall, we've had students leave school early. Girls' tennis team left 6 times early. So if school were to be extended an hour, they would lose another hour of instruction at least 6 times during the year. This doesn't include state tournaments. The cross-country team has 5 meets in which students leave early. Most of the meets start at 4 o'clock. If we were to extend that time back, then students very likely would have to be out a little bit earlier, and that means the cross-country students would miss a potential 5 hours of instruction. As I mentioned, this doesn't include the state tournaments. Like, for example, the girls' soccer team that Emma made reference to, they played during the day, and we don't count that. In the winter, there were no students leaving early for 2016-17. However, that's the fact of what happened, but with Nordic skiing, there's quite likely the possibility that students may have to leave early for either for meets or for practices, sometimes with sun setting as early as it is. We also looked at the spring sports. Boys and girls golf, there were 12 matches in which students left early, and if school time were to be extended, then the boys and girls would lose another hour, 12 times. Track and field, there were 5 meets that students left early for, and again, it would be the same thing. Softball, there were 2 games. Baseball, there were 2 games, but lacrosse, there was none. And that's at the high school level. At the middle school level, cross-country and track and field, that has 205 people participating in it. Cross-country, there's 75 students in the middle school are involved in cross-country, and those students may have to miss school early for different meets. Track, 130 students that were in it last year, and the same thing for them. It would probably be an hour or so. But that's just part of the athletic piece. There's another whole piece of it about associations. And the athletic associations, I looked at last year's, Kathy Weiland was able to gather the data for me, and we looked at things from flag football and lacrosse and soccer and all of those type of things, and the impact on those would be rather minimal because of they'd be outside. But during the indoor seasons for youth basketball, volleyball, gymnastics, and wrestling, we would have students that would be impacted by that. Our youth basketball for grades 1 through 8 had 555 players. They're both boys and girls. This goes from October to March. And some of those students practice right now at 8 or 9 o'clock, and there'd be a fight for gym time, which would make it even later for some students potentially. We have a high school rec program for grades 9 through 12. There are 71 players involved in that. And again, they would get the time of the gym based on the leftovers from the varsity and the high school sports. In volleyball, grades 5 through 8, we had 60 players participating, and Junior Olympics had 53. Again, volleyball is a fall sport, but it's indoor, and there would be some issues with gym space, and those practices could go later as well. We have pre-kindergarten and kindergarten gymnastics, which happens, and we have 84 students that participated in that. Grades 1 through 5 gymnastics, there were 280 students that were involved in that program. And so those students may end up also having later practices. I do not know if the gymnastics pre-K and 1-5 practice after the high school. I'm assuming that they do. I know the volleyball and basketball is like that, so I'm assuming that that would be the same thing. Wrestling, 24 students participate in wrestling, and again, the hours would have to be changed a little bit for that. As I mentioned, flag football, tackle football, very popular programs, but not something that I think is an issue right now. We've also done some looking at jobs and childcare. There are several students that at the secondary level who take care of their younger siblings, and if that were to be flipped, that would be an issue that families would have to wrestle with, and it could be potentially really difficult for families to figure out how to go about doing that. We also have students that have jobs after school, and this could be impacted if school's out an hour later. It would be difficult for the students to get to their job, and they may be less desirable to employers as well. One of the things that came up a lot at the listening session was about the MAC program, and what a change in school start time could mean for that MAC. Currently,
We have 195 students involved in the morning program, 116 at Wildwood and 79 at O.H. Anderson. If the school starts were to change, that would almost certainly would drop. There would probably be a lot less need for it. The afternoon has 200, 128 at Wildwood and 72 at O.H. Anderson. That would almost certainly increase. Right now, they're close to that capacity. They want to be at about 100 at each place. You can always find more space, but it requires you to do things that you may not want to do. Which may mean that you usurp a classroom and have students in there, but you don't want to take that from a teacher. But you can find space if you look hard enough. It's just not the best and most optimal thing to do. We have a wait list right now at Wildwood. There's 15 students at Wildwood, and there's 1 at O.H. Anderson. The question came up about fees. They're $10.46 for students, about $400 a month is for families on that. It's difficult to predict. The assumption is that we would lose students in the morning, but we would add students in the afternoon, and that may create some space issues as to where they're going to find room for families or for students at that point. The other thing that we've spent a lot of time on is the scenarios, and the school board had 5 scenarios. Bill Manazzi created a document that shows what those are, and they're flipping, compressing, and pushing everybody back. And the flipping scenario starts with the secondary time at 9 o'clock, then O.H. Anderson would start at 7:45 and Wildwood at 7:55, and you can just back that off from there. And so if you had a secondary start at 8:45, then O.H. Anderson would be 7:30 and Wildwood 7:40, and so forth. Compressing is the thing that we've talked about in terms of adding buses so that there's less time between the Tier 1 bus run and the Tier 2 bus run. If we were to compress and get that time down between the two schools to about 45 minutes, that would cost around $330,000, but we think that could get done. And so if the secondary were to start, say, at 8:30, then O.H. Anderson could start at 7:35 and Wildwood at 7:45. If the secondary started at 8:45, O.H. Anderson 7:50 and Wildwood 8 o'clock, and so on. This, however, would be an additional cost. We also looked at a possibility of pushing the time back. That would mean that the secondary might move back from 8 to 8:30. That means O.H. Anderson would start at 9:35 and Wildwood at 9:45. So those are some of the options that we've talked about. The board has directed me to do other research, and I think I've answered some of the questions that have come up, and now I need to hear what other research you want to do or you want me to do as we get continuing on this examination.
Yeah, I have a question starting with the MAC numbers, and I know that Kathy Weiland sent me an email with you on it regarding some of the numbers, but I don't know if the whole board got that, and I'm wondering, I don't recall if she said exactly what the capacity would be, and wondered if you happen to have that, and if not, if we could just make sure that rest of the board members get that. Because we want to know if there's even what's the capacity that they could hold for MAC after school.
As I mentioned, you can always find space, but it's just not always the most optimal.
Okay.
So a teacher could, like for example, at Wildwood, maybe you would take the art room as a place that students can go to. Right now they go to the computer lab, the gym, and the cafeteria. So you can do that, but it's not ideal. The capacity, according to her email, is about 90 children per site. They're already over that at one of the schools. And so that's what she had said about capacity.
Okay,
90.
thank you.
Other questions, information requests?
I'm sorry, we've had plenty of time to gather the information, we've had plenty of feedback, but, I'm not asking for anything else.
What is the cost on the pushback idea? You're
That,
gonna have to tell me about that one.
yeah, there would probably be no cost on that because it would still be the 2 tiers of transportation, but then the students would start at the elementary significantly later.
Okay, it's 9:35, 9:45.
But in terms of transportation, it's still 2 bus routes.
I have another question. On, when you mentioned adding minutes at the secondary level, I don't quite follow why we're so far below other districts. Could you give me a little context with that and why we would maybe want to add the minutes? I know that's kind of a side subject to what we're talking about here, but when you talk on it, I don't feel like I understand it
There's two
in
things on
context.
adding time to the school day. The first one is that according to Tom Burr, he's the Director of Transportation of St. Paul School District, and Arlen Hedvig is the person that works with Minnesota Central. You want to have more time in the afternoon, and so a later school, if the schools were to flip and the high school and middle school would be extended by 10 minutes, that would give you more time for the bus runs to do that, because more elementary students ride the bus than high school. And so you'd have a little bit more time, and so you wouldn't have as many late buses or buses arriving late at the elementary school. From time to time, we still will have a bus that will arrive late to O.H. Anderson, say. The second thing is that it would add some buffer to the school day. We're a district that doesn't have any late starts or early releases for its professional development. As you know, we're 12 hours, very close to cutting it really tight. And so we want to have opportunities for staff to do some of the PLC work and some of the important work that they need to do. We need to figure out a creative way to look at finding time for that.
So if we made no change, is there still an option to add time at the secondary level, or is that not possible with the bus runs?
It's not possible with the bus.
Okay.
If the bus run stays where it is, right? If the school times stay as they are, secondary at 8 o'clock, adding time to the school day would not get the buses from the high school from the secondary schools to the elementary schools in time.
Because you can't add to the elementary level. Okay.
And the issue with adding at the elementary level is a contractual issue, how much time we can have throughout the teacher contract.
And you couldn't add it during lunch or recess or some.
You might be able to add it. We already at Wildwood, we're at 40 minutes of lunch and recess, which is more than the contract requires. The idea being that we want to have students be more active, and so that makes sense. It's more difficult at O.H. Anderson for scheduling reasons, not for anything, just logistically.
Well, from the, this isn't really a question, but it's kind of more of a comment, but from the budget meeting tonight, the compress option, or any option that would add cost to busing, is really not an option. I mean, the budgetary constraints that we're gonna see next year and the year after are breathtakingly scary. And so we just cannot, I think the bus thing about adding more cost to the busing, however that would look, I think is not an option for us. And the full board will hear the report on December 7th, which will highlight some of the budgetary concerns. I have questions on the child care. Do we have any idea how many more people might want to use the PM section of MAC if there was going to be a flipped scenario? If we're going to do the flipped with elementary going early and then second and middle school and high school going later, do we have any idea how many more people we would have added to that PM?
We're expecting a lot more, but there's not a specific number. It's not like 18 or 38 or 100. We can ask people who are using the program right now and get some kind of anecdotal answer, but we've not conducted a poll and would you use it and so forth.
Right. I mean, it could be a lot.
A lot.
Mm-hmm. And to the point where we would not have the capacity, the idea about the spacing or whatever. But more importantly, the way I'm looking at it is the staffing component of that afternoon MAC. No longer would students wouldn't be able to help in that scenario either because they're going to school later. So that is really a big scary for me, is that child care afternoon piece, because we just don't know. And I don't know how, if we could do a survey that would ask the question, but that one there keeps me awake at night, wondering what could happen.
Other question? So if we're voting on this in December, will we just get to hear what the proposal is that you will propose to us at our December study session, or will we
I think it's important that we come collectively to some kind of, what do we want to do? If it's just something that you want me to do without board input on that, I can do that, but I don't think that's the best way to do things. I think that we should collectively discuss it. We have it scheduled for December 7th, see where we are. I do not want to put a proposal forward that will be divisive. I don't want to put a proposal forward that will create animosity or a lot of disagreements. I don't know if there is once you start down this road of looking at school start time, you will inevitably make some people angry. Some of the emails that we've all gotten, at least I think we've all gotten, have been very positive about making a switch. You need to do this. Why aren't you listening to the research? Some of that type of thing. We've also gotten some that have been very, you need to keep things the way they are. Aren't you listening to the community? We don't want this. So it's, it's not, if we're looking for something that's going to make everybody happy, I don't think it exists.
Are you wanting more thoughts and comments from the board tonight, or at the next study session, or when do you want?
At any time. If you have them now, I'm happy to get after it this next week and have it before the 7th, or the 7th becomes a quick turnaround on the 14th.
Yeah, well, I have some comments, not necessarily really anything that needs to be researched. I'm happy to share them if people want. Now, or do we think that we need to?
Are they comments we've discussed before, reiterating some of the conversation, or are they new ideas that we might want to mull over and think
Well,
about?
Yeah, I want to, well,
Go ahead.
I think so. So I did, I talked to a school board member in St. Paul, who's on the MSBA board, and so we had breakfast as a part of MSBA business. So I asked her, I said, hey, you guys have just done this, tell me more. And then I also they have a section on the website, St. Paul Schools, that talks about this too. They started the journey in 2013, and the implementation phase is 2019. So they've been wrestling this for quite a long time. But one of the things, they have the luxury, as do some other districts, the luxury of a 3-tier bus system. Again, coming back to the fact we can't afford the 3-tier bus system. So what's going to happen in St. Paul, to my understanding, according to the website and Zuki, is that they are going to have their late start elementaries will stay late start elementaries. Some of their elementaries that are mid-time will go early, and then the middle school and high school will go in between. But what will happen for them is the parents will be able to decide at a forum in 2018, they'll have the ability to say, the early time is really good for us, we're going to go with the early start school, or the late start elementary is good for us, we're going to go that way. So what we're facing here, potentially, obviously, there'll be some changes for people, but at least they'll have a little bit more say in what works for their family. And I talked to her about the childcare thing, and she said this is really an area that they're worried about in St. Paul. And then I think my last comment on this is the return on investment. Is the half hour that we're talking about pushing back the middle school and the high school worth changing pretty much everyone's schedule? And is it worth it? I think that's, if we distill this argument right down to its core, that's what we're talking about. So these are things that I have played over and over again in my head at night when I'm trying to get to sleep. And I don't have answers to, but I certainly am thinking about them. So if that is helpful in any way, that's...
Anything else for Dr. Larson?
I just would be curious, and you don't have to answer right now, but we've had some thoughts in some of the emails or suggestions of looking at think outside the box type options. And, I don't know if other school districts have done them or not, and we don't need to go into them all right now, but it is something I would be curious. It's kind of like the low-hanging fruit that we've asked for. What are some other things that might be options that we haven't thought of that people suggested, and just would be curious as to your feedback on them. But you don't have to do it all right now.
No, the idea of using time has been something that the schools have struggled with mightily, and there's been a lot of work done on that very thing. And it's some pretty innovative things, lunch and learn and win time for 2 examples, to try to relieve some student stress and provide opportunities for students to get caught up on work or have their needs met. Students that are struggling in reading or math will go on their win time to that support, not losing any core curriculum. So we've looked at those type of things, and that's kind of thinking out of the box. It's difficult in terms of having like late starts because we're only 12 hours over the minimum, and so that really hamstrings us. That's why part of the interest that I have is extending the student day to provide some opportunities to do those type of things. So to answer your question, there's probably more that can be done.
So I have 2 things. Have we consulted with elementary schools who have the earlier start time, the 7:30 kinds of things, but not Wayzata? I mean, Wayzata is still in a transitional kind of phase, but are there schools, maybe privates or charter schools or other publics that have that 7:30 a.m. start time for the elementary age? And if there's information that you can bring to the study session, that would be helpful. From talking with them, we don't need to do that now. The other one is, I know at the high school listening session, Terry Troutman talked about increases in certain student behaviors. And if we could have that data to look at as well over time would be, I think, helpful to the board as well.
Is it already being done? I mean, I know there's so much attention given to the wellness of the students. As far as outside of the box, like what Stacy was saying, maybe somehow identifying students that may need more sleep or something, and maybe designing a program or something outside of the box that way. And I know we've got already things going on, but I think it might be worthwhile to think of like some special thing or something where we can help identify those who may need it.
I'll think on those.
Like,
I think part of that goes back to, at the last study session, we had asked, did a more complete update on, we keep referring to as low-hanging fruit, which I
Yeah.
don't like that term, I don't know what to call it at this point, because we all know what
No,
that
that's
means.
very low-hanging.
But, it might fold into that report, Mark, as you look at those things, because some of those things will change and could be innovative in how they're addressed. And so we had asked for that at the study session, and so I assume that's still coming for December 7th as well, is that complete look at that list again of where we are with implementation with those items.
And that was the list from January 5th last year.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Mike, another thought?
I just I kind of agree with what Kevin was commenting on too, about what he said about St. Paul, and then the overall question, is it worth it? And I think that's something that kind of rung with me a little bit.
So how do you want Mark to answer that, though?
No, I just,
Well, is it a
you know.
cost-benefit analysis
I mean-
piece? I mean, how do you answer the question? I think it's a great question, but,
Yeah.
but to hand it to Mark like that without some structure or framework is not very fair. So,
Well, I don't think he was asking for feedback on it, he's just sharing.
Okay.
My preamble was a couple statements.
Yeah, so I just was, yeah.
They weren't questions.
Okay.
Simply
No.
things I'm wrestling with in my head, and I don't think that there's really answer that
Yeah, and you made me wrestle with it too by saying that, so.
Okay. Just want to make sure that Mark is clear on what we're asking.
Okay. No question of
Clear.
Mark.
Okay. Yep, Julie?
So when Wayzata switched, they did a childcare class the last hour of the day for some of the elementary students. And I know we no longer have a child development class, right, at the high school? And so, I mean, is that even something that's an option? To do something like Wayzata did for Mac?
I suppose it is.
I don't know.
But students didn't register for it before, so it was eventually dropped from the curriculum.
So
Maybe it
then,
might
so
get-
then it's probably not an option, is what you're saying?
It's very unlikely.
Okay.
Students will.
And I don't know how successful it is at Wayzata or anything like that, but, it was a headline the day that they switched. So, just curious.
Okay. If you think of anything else, please drop Dr. Larson an email. so you have some time to gather any information you might be interested in for the study session on the 7th. Action items, 10A, approval of 2016-17 audit. Dr. Larson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board.
1 second. Do you want to take a recess, Kevin? Do you hear the audit? You've heard the audit.
I heard the audit.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
But I'll be right back.
Okay.
Bill Manazzi here, business manager, is here to introduce MMKR, who will be presenting the findings of the financial audit. We're required annually to have an annual audit done by an external certified public accounting firm. And I'll turn over to you, Mr. Manazzi.
Good evening. I am here simply to introduce, and I'm happy to do so, Jim Eichten, the managing partner with MMKR CPAs. And I want to thank Jim for his patience as the school board administration worked through what we all know are some very important issues tonight. So thank you, Jim. As Dr. Larson mentioned, each year a school district is required to, or has the opportunity to, have an external financial audit of our financial statements. Jim is here to present the results and overview from the 2016-17 fiscal year. The District Finance Committee had an opportunity to review the results before this meeting. And I just want to mention that Jim and his team did work very hard, and I have no doubt that his presentation will give the board and the community a good understanding of our financial position as of June 2017. So, welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Bill. Members of the board, superintendent, my name is Jim Eichten. As mentioned, I'm here this evening to provide a presentation on the audit report for the school district for the year ended December 31st, June 30th, 2017. I think it's important, first of all, to understand the role of the auditor. It is a requirement in state statutes that the district complete a financial statement of its annual financial information. It is also a requirement in statute that the district have an audit completed by an independent certified public accountant, which is my role in being here. As part of that role, our standards also require us to provide a number of opinions specifically towards the financial statements, but also your compliance with federal laws and regulations as well as state laws and regulations. I did provide a copy to the board this evening of the financial report as well as the management report. The management report is my document that I prepare that really provides some results of the audit that you could read through and find out how the audit went without actually me being here. But I'll touch on the highlights of that document with some presentation information. So first of all, the audit results for this year were very good. The first point I would like to make before I get into the PowerPoint specifically is the timeliness of the audit. Tonight is an early November meeting. This is probably the earliest I've presented in the years that I've been in audit of the Mahtomedi. The information was provided very timely to us. There was an assertive action taken by the management, Bill specifically, to get the audit done on a timely basis and get information to the board and the community quickly. And so we're here on a very timely basis this year. Take that from that standpoint and look at the results. We were able to issue a clean opinion on the financial statements, which we've been able to do for all of the years that I presented, and I'm certain before that. This year, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board did issue some new standards on the reporting for other post-employment benefits that were quite significant and actually added a couple of layers of challenge to the audit process, which probably adds to the element of the timeliness of the report given some of the changes in that area. So most importantly, though, we were able to issue that clean opinion. I mentioned we do provide an opinion on the internal controls of the district. It is an item of report or a reportable item within the report that we do provide that in the context of limited segregation of duties. The Finance Department, given its size and given its nature, does not have perfect segregation of duties, so we complete our audit under that definition. That being said, we look for compensating controls and different internal controls as part of that process to verify that things are working well, and we found that they were, even though we have that limited segregation of duties comment, which is very common for districts of your size. I mentioned the audit results in the other findings, the other reports I issued in the single audit area, as well as the laws and regulations, and we did not have any findings to report. So all in all, this year was a very clean audit, no findings, no reportable items other than the segregation duties clarification. So exceptional results, the exact results you were looking for. On top of that, probably the highlight of the audit for this year is this slide, which is actually, from a school board perspective, very important given the audit results from last year. It is an important element of an audit that if there are any findings, that they're properly followed up on and eliminated the following fiscal year. Last year we had 3 audit findings, 1 in the area of audit adjustments and 2 in the area of Minnesota legal compliance that, given this year's testing, were eliminated. And not only did the finance staff find it important that the audit report be provided timely, but also that these findings were eliminated. And all the staff should be commended for eliminating the findings that we had last year. So that's very another positive result, and probably for me, one of the highlights. So an audit really has 2 components to it. The first being the compliance side. I mentioned that the audit results were very positive on that state. The second part of any audit is really how you're doing financially. We do provide a number of different graphical presentations in the management report to try to summarize the financial results. The first one being a presentation of some trends in fund balance. Fund balance as a percentage of operations is a very common percentage used by school districts, including Mahtomedi, to analyze or put a benchmark towards how you're doing from a financial perspective. The statewide fund balance has is a tool that's actually used by all districts, and as well as the Minnesota Department of Education to guide how much equity a school district has. So on average, school districts have about 20% fund balance. It has been declining over the last several years as the economy has stabilized after some of the challenges in the early 2008, 2009, 2010 area. The blue graph you see on that presentation is Mahtomedi's fund balance. You can see that you followed very similar results from the statewide averages as you increased fund balance due to some of the cash shortages, and then you've seen some declines recently over in the last 2 years, and I'll get to 2017 here in a little bit. At the end of the year, the school district's fund balance under statewide calculations is 13.8% compared to the 20% you're seeing statewide. We also provide some information on revenues and expenditures comparative to metro averages for your district. This particular graph shows revenues on a per student basis. The district does receive less revenues on a per student basis than your comparable 7-county metro area school district, almost about $1,300 per resident. Most of it's in state aid. There's a wide variety of reasons for that I'm not going to necessarily get into, but what it does state, and what is probably the most important part of that is when you have less revenues, you generally have less expenses, which we'll see on the next presentation. Some of the increases in expenditures this year, revenues this year, partly relate to the increased aid that came from the state, the 2% increase in formula, as well as some additional state special education aid that you received really to cover additional expenses you had in that area. But also you did have a decline in the number of students, so naturally the divisor here is lower, which is causing some of the increases to the presentation. On the expense side, as you might expect, you have less revenues coming in on a per student basis, thus you have less expenditures. In 2016, the district spent about $10,900 per student, when on average in the other 7-county metro area schools it's about $11,900, about $1,000 less dollars spent per student. In 2017, you did see some additional increases in mainly 2 categories: regular instruction, mainly towards salaries for staff, and then in the area of special education instruction, mostly for transportation. We're seeing that throughout the metro area, that's a category that continues to rise, but not only for Mahtomedi, but for all districts, or the majority of districts in the metro area. So getting on to individual fund perspective, this particular presentation provides a trend line in the district's financial position. At the end of the year, the district completed the year with a fund balance decline of roughly $400,000. That compares to a budgeted decline of about $500,000. So in terms of how you compare to the budget that was adopted, it's almost identical. There were some variable differences in revenues were higher and expenses were higher, but on a net basis, it did equal the decline that was put into budget. You'll see that the district, on this particular presentation, the district is guided by a fund balance policy. The policy states that you'll have a minimum unassigned fund balance of 8%. After the audit, after the decline in fund balance this particular year, you end the year at roughly 8.2%. As you can see, that percentile is above the minimum that is provided in that fund balance policy. That being said, if you repeat the year you just went through, you'll be below that minimum as you go towards next year. Certainly that was highlighted at our Finance Committee earlier today, and Kevin referenced it a little bit in his comments earlier. And certainly from the audit perspective, that fund balance policy really should be a guidance for the board, something to look at as you make future decisions. Right now, you certainly have a fund balance that meets your policy. I'm not going to look at, well, this is an important presentation. One of the important elements of this particular presentation does show the students served. We put this in the presentation because most districts that we work with generally have challenges when it comes to financial pictures when you have a declining enrollment situation or when you're seeing a decline in students. This, as you can see in this presentation, in 2017, you did have a decline in the number of students that you served, which is adding to the certainly the decline in the financial position, and should be constantly monitored as you look at next year and the year after in terms of trend lines of students, as it certainly can have a major impact on your financial situation. I'm going to skip over those and get to some other information that was provided. The district does have some other funds. A food service fund showed a decline in fund balance this particular year. You're finding the food service fund, in terms of the amount of meals sales, did decline in 2017. Probably correlates back to the number of the students that you actually had declined as well. And then the community service area, you can see there that there's an increase in fund balance in that particular fund, which matched the fund balance policy that was adopted. So in summary, we did issue a clean opinion on the district's financial report. I highlighted the implementation of GASB Statement 75. We covered some of the numbers in that particular area at the Finance Committee meeting. I don't need to go over. We did have the one internal control reporting item on segregation of duties, which certainly isn't a concern, but we did not have any other findings to report. And on top of that, you were able to eliminate all other prior year findings. And lastly, we're seeing the general fund financial position is declining this year, but is slightly above the fund balance policy. And based on the discussion at the Finance Committee tonight, certainly all of the people involved at the board level, as well as anybody in that committee, certainly saw the impact that can have on the future. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you have for me.
Any questions? Mike?
If we have a marked increase in our student count, would that have a positive effect on that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Most of the funding is based on student population, so, yeah.
May have a better.
Yeah, you would take all that into account, yeah? Yes?
So when you say a repeat of this year would put us below the minimum, do you mean a repeat of this year in terms of the student count?
I was referencing the 500, it's actually 400,000. So you had a $400,000 decline in fund balance. So if you were to do that again this year and adopt another $400, or have the year finish with a $400,000 decline in fund balance, you would have a fund balance as a percentage of expenditures that's less than the 8%.
And what was causing the decline?
What's causing the decline in fund balance? Well, you're spending more than you
I
have.
mean, is it because we based the number on the certain number of students?
I think
at
that's
the
a Bill
din-
question.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We can, he can answer the question if you'd like, that'd be fine. I think it's a great question.
Right.
Bill, you want to answer that?
Do you want to answer tonight or save it for the study session when we dig into the financial pieces more then?
If it's okay with you, Stacy.
Absolutely, yes.
I can guarantee you we'll leave it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But you remember we took 500, we took money. from
Yes,
the
I
fund
did,
balance,
but
so-
I didn't know how the student count tied into that. Okay, thank you.
Good question.
All right, thank you.
So at this time, Madam
So we
Chair.
need a motion. So we've heard the audit, and so we need a motion to approve the audit.
Approval?
Second.
Thank you. Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for staying this evening. School Board Committee reports, AMSD. Mike?
There was an AMSD meeting on the 27th, and the board approved the fiscal year 2017 auditor's report, and there were no major findings. Board received an update on the ad hoc committee on integration and equity, and moving towards the December 8th Reimagine Minnesota, which, we were all invited to, meeting, as you know. The board reviewed and discussed the draft 2018 legislative platform outline. Some changes were recommended, and the board will review and possibly approve at the next meeting. AMSD gave the Friend of Public Education Award to Senator Al Franken. He was accepted by his local liaison, Dan Solomon. Also, given the award was given to Mark Dayton for his lifetime support of public education, and Education Commissioner Brenda Cassellius accepted it on his behalf, and that's about it.
Mate, Julie.
We're having a board meeting next week, but thank you to everyone who's contributed. We had 100% board participation in the fall fund drive, and we hope the community opens their wallet and gives to the max, right?
All right. MSBA.
MSBA. November 18th, we have the pre-delegate assembly at the League of Cities. I'm kind of looking at Julie on this because she's a delegate, and I'll plan on attending that. I'll plan to attend. And then December 1st and 2nd, we have the delegate assembly at the Doubletree in Minneapolis. And Friday night, there's a presentation before the delegate assembly. We'll have some FBI agents presenting on cybersecurity. So it promises to be pretty interesting. Winter conference, which Laura was looking for people to commit to doing this. It always is a good event, and I think the Mahtomedi schools, we have a few different presentations. I know I'm presenting a roundtable thing on foundations and fundraising, and then we found out that Kathy Nickleby, Jim Lane, and I are going to do a presentation also. So I don't know. I think who else?
Dr. Newbeck is giving a presentation.
Okay.
Middle school innovation. I think some of the same information from tonight.
And are you presenting with anyone else, Mike? A school board member?
Yeah.
Lucy, all right.
And we'll have teachers with us as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, were the others accepted, did we find out?
It was in the board notes a while ago.
Right,
I
that's
think
what
it
I
was Boyd Anderson, Beth Technology.
Who was presenting with OH? Is that you, Julie? Do you remember? Okay.
I think it was because I did the mindset one last year.
Okay. So if we haven't given you that time for the presentation, she'll need that. Okay. Also, in a email from MSBA, you have to help me with language, Kevin, with George Kimball coming off the White Bear School Board, the District 6 position is open.
Yes.
Can you talk more about that?
So at the delegate, or
At the conference?
Conference, we actually vote on someone to represent District 6. So if there's anyone here that would like to consider being the District 6 person, I could talk to you afterwards and tell you what's entailed. The old saying about Boy Scouts, where it's an hour a week, is incorrect. There's more to it. And, but it's great. It's really great work. And what's nice is you really start to get education on a statewide perspective. So it's I would, strongly encourage anybody that wanted to do it, because it is, I've already done it. I'm out. Yeah, from the District 6 person then could vie for an executive position as well. So that's kind of a stepping stone to doing that if you wanted to consider that. So if anybody wants to, happy to talk to them.
916.
Well, we do have a minutes in the board pack, but I will say that the board is planning ahead for attendance at the national conference. We rotate those through the school and school association in April, and they're rotating through these districts, and as to when it becomes your turn. Well, for some reason this year, they've gotten a lot of people declining, so.
That's wonderful. That's great. We look forward to bringing back all kinds of information and experiences.
Maybe. To San Antonio.
Okay. Subcommittee reports, facilities. Who's senior person on facilities?
I have a little summary of our facilities last time. Julie Osterbauer shared a drone video with the group, kind of a little summary of the projects, the abatement bond projects and the completion, how great it looks. I think she also shared a link with the whole board, what it looked like. The project was completed within 1% of the bond, which is very good news for us, given that we had a lot of unforeseen underground problems during the project that caused a lot of cost overruns. So we were happy to stay on budget. We also received the presentation of the Crossroads concept from Bill and Lynn, which was discussing the evaluation of space needs at some of the buildings and that concept. There were concerns shared. Kevin stated that he would always like to see students having the best spaces in our buildings. And the facilities committee did ask that a clear vision for the project, state that a clear vision would be important, and that we are engaging some professionals to do some studies so we would have some better ideas about what our needs actually are. So that's kind of facilities.
Okay. Other items, reports, the Minnesota High School League group I sit on, 3 different things have come up. We should be thinking about drones at high school sporting events. Right now, they're not allowed, but that's going to be a discussion with the Minnesota High School League coming up about drones being at sporting events. So if you think about drones flying over the football field during the games, people
We should make sure we have drone insurance.
well, they haven't decided. There will be a conversation this year if that would be allowed or not. And so they're starting to look at that. They are also looking at the media broadcast piece with the hockey tournament. That contract is being discussed again. And then they have an ad hoc committee right now on transfer and eligibility, and looking at those rules that they've had in place for quite a while. So those are things that the high school league is looking at. And the last one we have is elementary PTO, which is Mike.
I did not attend the meeting this morning. They had other people there, and my presence wasn't necessary. I didn't need to be there, so I don't know. I wasn't there. They had Megan McCann or somebody speaking, and just basically said I wouldn't be asked to talk, so I didn't attend.
All right, superintendent's report.
Thank you. You're getting this, just take one and pass it on. Community book read is going to be a good time for the truth. The school board had read that book. Kathy Weiland, Dr. Weiland has arranged to have the editor of that book, Sun Young Shin, will be there, along with a panel discussion of 3 other authors who have written in that book. It's going to be on Tuesday, January 30th from 6:30 to 8:30. We've read the book, as I mentioned. We had that as part of our goal, and so there'll be 4 of the authors there, and it should be very entertaining, lively, and insightful, I believe. The other 3 things that I wanted to speak to is Zephyr Ideas Project. As of today, we have exactly 25 ideas that have been submitted. Some of them have been day 1, which is a way to get students to connect. That's at a high school. Web, where everyone belongs, is a middle school suggestion. There have been other suggestions and ideas from restorative justice to an open mic night, ways to get students' attendance with card keys, that type of thing. Something about healthy schools in terms of having Purell-type dispensers, an innovation lab, student fitness clubs, long-distance calling. Many families who move into the district have cell phones. They haven't changed their numbers. Teachers cannot use our phones in their rooms to make long-distance calls. I also urge teachers not to use their cell phones to make calls if they're calling parents. And so can we do something along those lines? Things from desk cycles and micro sabbaticals. It's a whole host of really interesting ideas. It closes tomorrow. I'm not sure if we'll extend it or not. Those will be some of the things that we'll be talking about, but I'm really pleased that we did have 25 ideas that have come forward. In terms of interaction with the website, we've had about 50 staff members who have signed in and have either looked at it or commented or something on that. So the numbers are, I was hoping for 100% involvement and 1,000 ideas, but this is really pretty good. Tomorrow morning, Patrick will be going to the innovation cohort meeting that I will not be at because I'll be at the TIES meeting, but we'll hear what the other districts, the other 7 districts are doing and where they are with that, and I'll be able to report that out. Second thing, you heard a little bit earlier on about Reimagine Minnesota. Sarah Dusick and I attended the last meeting in which we ended up looking at all of the issues that are confronting us. The one that we spent the most time on in our particular group was develop, sustain, and evaluate cultural competence for teachers. There were up to L of the ideas, so 12 different ideas, and they broke us into groups. And so our strategies is created in action steps and what we do and who's responsible for it. We're already doing a couple of things in that in terms of the cultural competence as part of our teacher. We're embedding that into our Danielson model. So we're doing some work on that, which I think is positive. December 8th, as you heard, is going to be the next meeting in which I believe the plans will be unveiled and shared with everyone. I don't know what happened with any of the other letters. All I know is our particular group with A, and that information has not been shared yet with the superintendents. And then yesterday we had a cohort learning day. There was Beth Sneeden, Patrick Crothers, Bill Manazzi, Mike Newbeck, and me. This was at TIES, and part of our cohort learning is on 3 things: personalized learning, individualization, equity. It's personalization, leadership capacity, and innovation. And we talked about how we could work on our cohort learning about personalizing education with an equity lens, and so that having students feel as if they belong and that they're connected are the things that we think will make a difference for them. So we're continuing to look at things with an equity lens. Among the stuff that we've talked about and that we're planning to implement this year about personalized learning include things that we look at what it currently is and what it's not, and then what's the end in view. And we want to make sure that students have more chance for autonomy in their own learning. Student choice over the product and method, and the students need to understand then where they are, and that's part of the formative assessment that we've done a lot of work in that. The idea is that we have capstone projects, but maybe we should think about cornerstone projects, where it's more of a cornerstone to their learning, but not a capstone at the end, so it's part of the way through. So we're doing some good work in that area. We focused on personalized learning. We have 2 other sessions set up. One of those will be focusing on innovation. The other one will be focusing on leadership capacity. But all in all, it's been a good sessions for us. And that concludes my report.
Wow, a lot going on, thank you. Anything else for the group? Motion to adjourn?
Second.